Did you know that if you do not believe in the theory of evolution, especially as a Christian, that you are considered a stupid person, one who denies science, one who is incapable of analyzing observable facts of reality and scientific data and coming to the proper and appropriate conclusions and inferences? After all, you believe in a sky daddy, right? You have exchanged your reason for faith. At least that's what all our top-notch scientists and academics seem to say. Well, I didn't get that memo. I've been doing both faith and reason for quite a while now. Shocker, eh? I bet you didn't know that. You know who else didn't get that memo? Most of the founding fathers of science in this Western world. They did not get that memo, where they are unable to believe in a creator and do science. Did you get that memo? Well, this episode, we are going to see just how valid that memo is. We're going to dive in and take a look at the ongoing war between evolution, science, and faith. So let's do it. We're going to look at a video of an atheist YouTuber science guy of 6 reasons not to believe in evolution. I want to show you a few tactics, although there is more, that the evolutionists use to protect this lie. This theory is destroying the faith of countless young people. Well, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dominion, where we are almost like the Rosetta Stone. We are the missing puzzle piece. Not this show itself, but what we're trying to do here is to reveal the scriptures and the truth of the scriptures. The scriptures are the Rosetta Stone of life. And I don't even know if I'm saying that word properly. You know, I was thinking about today, how can I explain the purpose of the show again in a different way? And the Rosetta Stone came to mind, where it is like the missing puzzle piece to understand our reality. If you do remember, last week, we did have a new thing brought to the show. And it is called, Where's Trump? And so now, Trump, that was above the fireplace last episode, is now in a different spot. And so for those who are bored and have a mind like a goldfish maybe, that needs something attractive every 3.5 seconds, well, you can start looking for that Trump somewhere in the set here. What else do we have to share here? Okay, I've been kind of wanting to share. I'll share quickly that I understand my content is still new. I am still new at doing things like this. I've been trying to cut down the lengths of these episodes, but you know, my original intention was not to just be another person, another thumbnail or channel that just spits out their truths, right? And it doesn't ground it in reality, doesn't ground it in logic and reason, even though I could even do a better job at that. And so, I mean, if you're going to do short videos, that's what it comes down to. It's just saying certain facts that are facts to you, but how do you prove that and explain that to other people? And so that's the struggle I'm in right now, trying to make my episodes shorter. But doing these longer intros doesn't help either, does it? So today, we're going to look at a video of an atheist YouTuber science guy responding to a creationist named Kyle. This YouTuber channel is kind of a off episode that he's been doing, and it's called Reacteria. And he's an evolutionist. He likes to react to creationist videos, theistic videos of science. And his name's Forrest. And so he's reacting to this guy, Kyle, on his video of 6 reasons not to believe in evolution. This video has 1.2 million views. Wow. That's not too bad. You know, it's almost as much as mine. Now, you may be asking, Ben, what is your position on evolution, faith, and science? Well, first off, thanks for asking. Personally, I think evolution is from the pit of hell. I think it may be one of the biggest deceptions known to mankind. A nefarious global conspiracy of men, created and maintained for one purpose: to deny God and remove him from society. The topic of creationism versus evolution has been an intrigue of mine ever since the Lord saved me about 9 or 10 years ago. In that time, I've come a little familiar with both sides, but what bothers me more than just evolution, once again, is that Bible-believing Christians have incorporated the Bible with evolution. They have paid homage to the wisdom of men rather than to the wisdom of God. Now you say, what's the harm in believing evolution? Well, I will tell you that. This is my short list that I've come up with in a short period of time. For number one, like most of man's wisdom, it's opposite of the Word of God. You cannot harmonize the two. So when it comes to being a Christian, you are either believing men or you're believing God. And one way that you can tell if you're believing and following the wisdom of men is when you see the atheists and mockers out there, the unbelievers, being satisfied with what you're saying. That's a good compass that tells you, is this the truth of God or is this the wisdom of men? And number two, with the theory of evolution, the sole purpose it was created was to remove God from the equation. And what do you think happens to society? Well, there's no more fundamental truths of reality, is there? Everybody makes up what is right in their own eyes, like genders, like marriages, or a righteousness, a righteous standard that we judge people by in our judicial system. And we are seeing the consequences of that. Also, this theory is destroying the faith of countless young people that are ran through the propaganda system, our K-12 grad schools, government-run grad schools. And it is intentional. And if you are a Christian who supports this, this is what you're incentivizing. The Lord might have a problem with that, you know. These facts that I just mentioned are at the heart of evolution. It's a serious problem. And it must be exposed, like Ephesians 5:11 says. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. And that is what we are going to try to do. But if I could simplify it to just a single scripture reference that encapsulates exactly what's going on here, it would be Romans 1:21-24. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, and birds, and animals, and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. This is what you call divine insight and truth. You thought you were more sophisticated in the 21st century, where we don't worship stone idols or beasts anymore, or have eliminated the gods of science? No. We believe more than ever that animals are our creators. We do not honor God and his great wisdom and power in creating this insane reality that we find ourselves in and observe all around us. We've exchanged his glory for that of beasts. Before we watch this video though, I want to show you a few tactics, although there is more, that the evolutionists use to protect this lie and that you should watch out for. It is extremely sly. And if we don't catch it, we are at risk at being deceived ourselves, like many are, and even many Christians. But once you see it, I'm hoping it will help you realize the facade that it is. And so number one of the tactics that evolutionists use to keep their conspiracy theory going here. They equate science with evolution. You know, it's kind of like, remember in COVID days when Fauci equated himself with science? It's exactly like that. To them, these two terms are interchangeable. It's a brainwashing and pressure tactic, especially when prominent academics do it. If you don't believe in evolution, you do not believe in science. Number two, they always say creationists do not understand it. When a creationist challenges them, they always try to discredit them, discredit their intellect, and throw shade over what the creationist is pointing out. And they just say, oh, you don't understand evolution. You don't know what you're talking about. Number three, the ad hominem attacks. This is a huge one. And to me, this reveals their insecurity with their beliefs. It is quite rare to find an intellectual, peaceful evolutionist. But it is rare to not find one on the creationist side, I think. Right? The creationist usually concentrates on the facts, and the evolutionist concentrates on ad hominem attacks, trying to attack his character, to confuse the people and dissuade them from looking at what he's actually saying, to demeaning him. Number four, and this might be the biggest one, that allows them to operate as shapeshifters. It is to act like observable, repeatable evolution is the same as non-observable, non-repeatable evolution. And what do I mean by that? In other words, if you're familiar with evolution and science, it's creationists like to make a distinction there of micro and macro evolution. Micro being the changes that everybody agrees with within the kind, right? Within the kind family. So all dogs, they change. We can see the variety in them. Okay, but this does not mean a dog changes into a cat over 1 million years. And so the evolutionists will not put a distinction there. They count both as the same evolution. But remember, one is non-observable and repeatable, which is the scientific method, and one is. And so those 4 points is how they constantly shift around in the shadows and maintain their credibility somehow. I don't know how, but there are many more ways that they keep their theory going, and we'll see a bit more in the video. But these are most certainly the most prominent. Now, I'm going to skip all Forrest's introduction here for time's sake. I would encourage you to watch the video just to get a better sense of what I'm responding to maybe. But I simply can't play the whole video. So we're going to start where Forrest begins Kyle's video. And let's get into it.
In the year 2002, in Cobb County, Georgia, there was a sticker that was placed on the inside cover of the biology textbooks. That sticker simply said that these textbooks contain information on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, about living organisms, and it should be looked at with an open mind, studied carefully, and critically considered.
Wow. I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised to see a sticker like that exists in the public school. Mind you, that was 23 years ago now. But to me, this seems like an honest, logical, reasonable way to approach all science, not just evolution, but all science. This is what the public school conveys. They say, we just want to get them to think critically, right? Have you not heard this before? They say this all the time. We just want to get the students to think outside the box, to think critically and reasonably and look at all the facts. So, man, this has actually really stunned me because I just know evolution, and that's not the way they present themselves. But let's continue.
I actually remember this sticker. This isn't the only one of its kind. There have been lots and lots of little disclaimers on teaching evolutionary biology in public schools across the country. There's a few things that always stick out to me about things like this. The first one being, what is a theory? What does that word actually mean? Because in common parlance, theory is just a wild guess, a random hypothesis, something that you came up with off the top of your head. But in science, it means something very, very different. And when you put stickers like this or disclaimers like this on textbooks, not only are you dissuading people from believing that science is real, but also you are misinforming them. You are teaching them an inaccurate definition of a scientific term.
Okay, to be transparent, I'm not actually stunned. And you know why? Because I know that those who believe in evolution don't consider it as theory, but claim it as fact. They do not approach it with an open mind. They do not study carefully or critically consider it. Because if they did, they would soon realize that the data, the cold hard facts, do not support what they really mean by evolution. So then why do they believe in it? Well, I'm glad you asked. Check this out. I did a little research on this sticker as I was very interested in it, as I thought it was such a rare specimen to behold. Turns out it's actually an extinct specimen now. I'm going to show you this this article. This is by the scientific article Nature. The sticker's read, "This textbook contains material on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things. This material should be approached with an open mind, studied carefully, and critically considered." But 5 local parents, backed up by the American Civil Liberties Union of Georgia, sued the school district. They claimed the stickers inhibit the teaching of evolution and promote faith-based alternative views on the origins of life, including creationism and intelligent design. Now listen to this. On January 13th, Clarence Cooper, a judge at the district court in Atlanta, ruled that the sticker misleads students regarding the significance and value of evolution in the scientific community. By placing stickers in the science books, the school board has effectively, improperly entangled itself with religion by appearing to take a position. He wrote in his ruling, and impressionable students are likely to view the message on the sticker as a union of church and state. This undermines the First Amendment, the judge ruled, so the stickers must go. I find this telling in 2 ways. It screams insecurity. You're telling me that your amazing theory, that you love to equate with science and fact, like it's the Holy Trinity, that it feels threatened, inhibited, and other views are promoted just by telling the students to study hard, think critically of the data that is put before them. Number 2, it screams hostility against God. Look at what the knee-jerk reaction is, and it's not coming from the creationists or theists. It's coming from those who want nothing to do with God, who are more than willing to say there is no evidence for God. If their evolutionary theory is threatened or questioned in any way, immediately it is concluded and asserted that creationism or intelligent design is benefiting from it. Now, why is that? Well, they know, just like every rational thinking person knows, that if evolution didn't create us through random chance in a long period of time, then we are obviously created by a creator. There's only 2 theoretical options here and logical options, but only 1 real logical and plausible option. But Forrest knows all this and he sees this. So he's trying to delegitimize the sticker in a smarter way, to make it seem like he's not doing what this judge and plaintiffs are doing. He decides to focus on the word theory and how these educator boards are actually misleading the public. Forrest says that the theory in layman's terms means something we just come up with quickly to explain why our car broke down. But the scientific meaning means all of our best evidence put together to describe how something works. But honestly, Forrest, it means the same thing. In science, it's just done a lot more thorough. I get what he's saying. Yet he takes the next 3 minutes to bloviate on the word theory. I think he should just stop with the propaganda and deception and just admit that he believes a weak, implausible theory to justify his unbelief and just live how he wants to live. But also, the problem here that he is laying out portrays that this sticker was posted in the public library somewhere. But where was this sticker actually posted? It was posted in scientific textbooks. And so who's reading these scientific textbooks? Students of sciences, right? And so should they not be very familiar with the scientific definition of evolution, or of theory, sorry. And so to me, can you start to see what he's doing here? So up next, Kyle, is the creationist, is going to go through his 6 points, and Forrest is going to butt in and respond to what he says. And we are going to begin with number 1, vestigial structures.
Number 1, vestigial organs. The argument goes that if humans evolved, then they would have had at one time organs that an animal would have used in a certain way, but would no longer be used in that way in the human body, and those organs would begin to atrophy and start to be used. If you did have vestigial organs in your body, that wouldn't prove evolution. You see, evolution has to go from a single-celled organism to a human, and you don't need organs that are decaying and atrophying. You need evolution to produce new organs. We should find wings that are almost ready to allow organisms to fly that can't yet fly. We should find new visionary optical connections in living organisms that don't have them. We should see things adding information, not losing genetic information.
Okay, so this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what evolution is and how it works. Evolution is not an inventor. It's a tinkerer. Sometimes we get totally new structures, sometimes we lose structures, but more often than not, it's just taking what's there and twisting it and changing it. That's why this whole argument about like half a wing or half an eye just doesn't make any sense. That's been a bad, outdated argument since the very beginning, since the very first time it was made.
Evolution is not an inventor. It's a tinkerer. But it only creates brand new things like an inventor sometimes. But most of the time, it just tinks. Is anybody else confused by that? It's almost like Forrest is the one that's misunderstanding evolution here. Is evolution a full-time tinkerer? But you see how he shifts the confusion over to the creation side? But then is clear as mud describing why Kyle's confused and doesn't know what he's talking about? Evolution doesn't create new things. It only does it sometimes, but mostly it tinks. Like, does that make sense to you guys? No, it doesn't. Well, our next clip is Forrest moves on to the evolution of the eye.
Take, for example, an eye. You don't find creatures out there in the wild that have like one half of a functioning eye that doesn't really do anything, and we're just waiting for the millions of years to pass for that eye to become fully formed. That's not how it works at all. What you have is a patch of photosensitive cells that slowly get better and better and more efficient at capturing information. Take, for example, iguanas. Iguanas have a third eye up on the top of their head, just a little patch of cells that can detect shadows. Is it a fully formed eyeball? No. Is it ever going to become one? Who knows? But right now it serves the purpose of showing them if a predator is coming in from ahead and swooping overhead, they can see the shadow so they know to react to that.
So there you have Forrest giving us an example of how this evolution process works. And he brings up the eye. He says, we don't find creatures with an eye that doesn't do anything. In other words, we don't find anything in creatures that don't have purpose, I think is what he's saying. It's almost like they were intelligently designed or something. Weird. But that's obviously not true, so it must have evolved. But then he shares this chart of how the eye evolved. Now, can you guys take a guess at the science involved in them knowing how the eye evolved? Well, you're looking at it. That artful chart there, and the assertion that the eye evolved in these steps. I dare you, go and search up what kind of information they have, what kind of observable data, scientific data they have to prove that the eye evolved. And just like Kent Hovind says a lot of times, it's a bunch of lines on paper, and he's correct. They do nice drawings and color pictures and stuff, and then they say, yeah, this is what happened right here. And so to make matters worse, by their own admission, the eye is so complex a structure, and there is such a wide-ranging design in nature that it must have evolved over 40 times. It seems like evolution is a full-time inventor after all. Now he goes on to the iguana photocell patch and infers this iguana has an early stage eye formation. Now I don't know about you, but I thought science was supposed to be repeatable, observable, and then build your scientific theory off that. So give me the exact process, Forrest, of how an eye can actually evolve, and then repeat it, please. Or have you thought maybe it's just a defense mechanism designed specifically for that kind of animal by a superintelligence, aka God? The same God who has made the hearing eye and the seeing eye. Proverbs 20:12. But if it is a defense mechanism, as Forrest actually states, what was it before that? Do we ever think about that? Because remember, you said it tinkers. So what did it tink from? Or was it just invented again? And if so, who the heck told it to do that? Isaiah 5:21. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight.
The second problem with the vestigial organ argument is that 185 list of vestigial organs, it began to dwindle very rapidly. Do you know, as we look more into the body, we realize that those vestigial organs were very useful.
This is almost a good argument. The idea that we're finding out more and more that these vestigial structures are actually useful in some way or another.
The real issue here is why they called it a vestigial organ in the first place. I call it vestigial of the gaps. This is where the scientists lack knowledge in why something exists, what its purpose is for, and so they slap it with the label vestigial, which now gives them fake evidence for their evolutionary theory.
Take, for example, the appendix. For a long time, we thought that the appendix was just completely useless, but now we found out that it actually has a lot to do with maintaining your gut biome. And if you ever somehow lose your gut biota, you take antibiotics or whatever, of course you didn't evolve with antibiotics, but something happens that ruins the flora in your intestines, your appendix has a little packet of all the bacteria that you need to replenish. So we're no longer calling the appendix a vestigial organ because we've found that it actually is useful. But the graphic that you used here, driving that number all the way down to 0, that makes no sense, because there are plenty that are very clearly useless. You even showed a few of them here. You've got the erector pili muscles that give you goosebumps. You've got your coccyx, your tailbone. That does absolutely nothing for you. You've got another one here, your Darwin's tubercle. Darwin's tubercle is this little bump on the back of your ear. Does nothing. Here's a really great one, is this tendon right here that connects to this muscle right here in the middle. This is called palmaris longus, and it does absolutely nothing. In fact, it's so useless that if I get any kind of tendon damage anywhere else in my body, a doctor would harvest this and use it elsewhere in my body because it does nothing for me here.
You know, this just infuriates me. Even though I was 99% sure that all this remaining vestigials that he now lists that says are vestigial organs or vestigial body parts, because I still understand the process of mutation in this sin-cursed world, and maybe something could be mutated out to where we lose function of it. I understand that that's a possibility. I looked them up anyways, and I don't know how they get away with this. They clearly are not useless. Jude was right about them when he said, "These people blaspheme all that they do not understand, and they are destroyed by all that they, like unreasoning animals, understand instinctively." For example, the goosebumps that are completely useless to the evolutionist community. I don't know about you, but I sure enjoy them. I don't know, they feel pretty good. But you know what? It took me a second to look up on Google Goosebumps can actually trap a layer of warm air around your skin. And now the newest research has that it potentially has links to hair regeneration. But yet they say it's completely useless. He also mentions the tailbone. And this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, your backbone has to end somewhere, does it not? That's like saying the tip of my finger is vestigial. Just go, like, it does nothing, right? What? This is crazy. I also looked up the forearm muscle he's talking about. That's not completely useless either. It helps you grab stuff. So it's absolutely astonishing the shameful things they will do to continue the charade that helps them and justify their unbelief in God. As a Christian or a man, a woman of faith, and one of observable reality, do you not agree full-heartedly with the words from Psalms 139, 13-14? For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Number 2, homology.
Number 2, the idea of homology. We're told that similarity proves ancient ancestry. And what I simply mean by that is we're told that because humans have similar physical characteristics to certain animals, that proves that they evolved from animals. Well, similarity doesn't prove evolution at all. In fact, you could see things that are similar and you would realize that those similarities are often caused by a common designer.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, here we go. Those silly Christians thinking that highly engineered and complex creatures are being designed and created again by a creator. Man, when will these people learn that nothing plus time can create whatever you want? You don't need intelligence.
Suppose there were a supernatural intelligent designer and he created a world where many organisms would need to drink the same water, eat the same kinds of food, walk over the same types of terrain. What would happen? Well, obviously, he would use similarities, similar structures to accomplish his goals.
Okay, so what you're doing here is you're begging the question. You're saying there's a creator. He made everything and he would do it the same way. Therefore, we see these homologous structures which verify that there's this creator. Now, you can very easily try to turn that around and say, well, evolution's doing the same thing. I think they evolved and therefore it looks like this. The difference is, in science, we look at the evidence and we say, where is this evidence pointing to? And then we go with that.
So this is absolutely huge when it comes to evolution. And it's so ambiguous. If something looks like another thing, they must have evolved from each other. But in the cases that they look like each other, but are proven they did not evolve from each other, well, that's also evolution. It's just a different type of evolution. It's so shady. Just quickly, what are things I would support homology by being from a designer? Well, like Kyle says, does it make sense that a creator would use the same kind of structures and functions that work best for the world he created? For some reason, evolutionists think that it makes more sense for an intelligent designer to make, let's say, a vehicle with square wheels, and then make a different kind of vehicle with triangular wheels, and then make a different kind of vehicle with circular wheels. That's something that if evolution was true, I could see happening or see being reality, but not someone with intelligence. But what other facts support a designer for intelligent design? How about information? Only ever observed to come from an intelligence. So when we talk about the genome, where did this information come from? Well, our experience only tells us intelligence. Only intelligence creates information. So why would we just infer that it can randomly happen? How about the simple observations of symbiotic relationships? That one thing cannot survive without the other. Or fully functional biological systems like nervous systems, digestive systems. And how these things even work together. You ever think about that? like how your visual system actually works, it's more than just having an eye that can receive light. You need something to transfer the data, to process the data, so it can actually interpret the light it has captured. This stuff takes foresight to make, ingenuity. It's not something you make one mutation at a time. Colossians 1:16, for by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him.
Proposed evidence for evolution number 3, the fossil record. But if you were to take that seriously and you were to go to the fossil record, what you would find is that those transformational fossils are missing on a grand scale. In fact, evolutionist Mark Ridley stated that no real evolutionist, whether gradualist or punctuationist, uses the fossil record as evidence in favor of the theory of evolution as opposed to special creation.
I recognize that name. Hold on just a second. Okay, so I just Googled Mark Ridley, and he is an esteemed evolutionary biologist who writes textbooks, college textbooks about evolution. So you're telling me that the person who literally studies and teaches this stuff for a living doesn't buy it or doesn't believe in a big major chunk of it? Let's look up that quote really quick. Okay, so it looks like that is a real quote. It's from an article in New Scientist from 1981, 40 years ago. When was Tiktaalik discovered? Tiktaalik was discovered in 2004. Tiktaalik is one of the most famous transitional fossils in history. So this was 20 years before that. So this guy said in the 80s that we don't have enough transition fossils. We've gotten some.
Now, this is surprising because this is one of the best evidences they use nowadays, the fossil record. And you can see how Forrest tries to bring it back. What? What was that quote from the 80s? Don't you know we have found Tiktaalik since then? Jeez, man, get your update, bro. If evolution was true, you know how many different transitional fossils there should be? When you really think about it, the amount of organisms that had to die for the first living cell to go to a four-legged animal is absurdly ridiculous. But the amount of the time that had to pass to accomplish this, if it were even possible, is also absurdly ridiculous. Two ridiculouses do not make a right, Forrest. It actually makes it 2 times more ridiculous. Simple math. Therefore, the amount of transitional fossils would also be ridiculously high. And you're telling me that because you have found one fossil, just one, science has changed forever and we came from monkeys. Amen. Please stop deceiving the world into believing something like this over one fossil. That's all you hear. Tiktaalik this, Tiktaalik that. If this theory is true, there would be no issue finding mountains of clear evidence. And so when it comes to Tiktaalik, they needed evidence to support their fairy tale that life started in the water, then it evolved onto the land. But they needed a transitional fossil to show that something was evolving from the water to the land. And by golly, they found it. Enter Tiktaalik, a creature intent on morphing onto land. And so it did. Now you ask, well, seeing they pretty much call evolution a fact and not a theory, they must certainly have unmovable evidence that proves this little guy was a transitional fossil from sea creature to land creature. One who could start using its fins, its limbs, to prop itself up in the shallow waters, to scope out its new home. Well, you're looking at it, not the beautifully animated image on the left, but the fossil on the right. This is the evidence they want you to believe to take you from observable reality to believe in a non-observable reality. Just understand the deception here. They take an extinct, fully functional and designed creature for its habitat and slap a label on it that says transitional because it kind of fits their godless story they made up. But you know what is much stronger, rational, reasonable, and logical evidence? God made every kind of animal fully formed and equipped for life on earth. Genesis 1:20, and God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of heavens." Genesis 1:24, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And so we see that God made every kind of creature for every kind of habitat. And it was done, finished, completed. Number 3, mutation.
Number 4, the idea of mutations. We're told that mutations prove you could get a certain single-celled organism to mutate over multiplied millions of years and bring about new information on a grand scale that, given enough time, you could get a human being. What's the problem with that line of reasoning? The problem is that mutations don't give us new information.
Yes, they do.
Mutations can only take information that is already available and cause it to decay.
That's not true either.
Mutations are an example of a loss of genetic information.
No, they're not. They can be, but they're not always. A mutation is just a change in your genetic code, in your DNA or your RNA, if you're an RNA type creature. Those come in a lot of different styles and flavors.
Yeah, I don't think Kyle did the creationists, any favor here. Forrest is kind of right. Mutations can add info by duplicating already existing info, or by mixing existing information up, or even deleting information. This is knowledge easily accessible. But what Kyle's getting at, which is accurate, is that it does not just come up with new information or new body plans. It is just dealing with existing information. For example, let's say there's bits of information, one called X and another D. When X and D are called for, it creates a hand. But can you get a wing out of X and D? Well, no, because a wing is represented by the information S and P. You cannot get S and P out of an X and a D. There could be 2 X's and 2 D's, or maybe the D comes before the X now, or the X and D combine maybe. But all you're going to get is a double hand, or just a hand, or a hand that is a lesser hand than the original hand, a mutated hand, one that does not function the way it is originally designed. Again, it's just dealing with existing information. But the evolutionist absolutely requires an S and a P, a wing, new information. And this is just not what we observe in reality, and it cannot be repeated. God is the first one to create all the information in the first kinds in the cells of the animals. Jeremiah 13:23. Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spots? I predict, not from the knowledge that gained from science or from Google that I could search for, but from wisdom and truth from the Creator's word and the discernment that it gives in one's life, that there will be certain fundamental parts in every specific kind's genome that cannot be changed to something other than that specific kind. I look at it like the category kind being a constraining factor to its evolution. It is a line that can never be crossed. There's much variety in lines that can be crossed within a kind, and we observe this repeatedly every day. God in his wisdom has allowed much variety in the ability for living things to adapt to the environment around them. But he did not create kinds for them to just evolve out of them. When science does catch up, they will not accept it, because it was never about the science to begin with. As I think we're starting to see, for although they knew God, they did not worship him as God.
Let me give you an example. For the last 100 years or more now, scientists have been studying fruit flies. They are great examples of how you can mutate an organism. We have been zapping these fruit flies with radiation and mutating them in chemical ways for more than 100 years now. And what do you have after all the radiation and mutation? Do you have a fruit fly that has evolved new genetic information? No, you don't. In fact, all you still have is a fruit fly. It hasn't evolved into anything else.
That's not how anything works. I can't just take a fly and blast it with radiation and tomorrow it's a dog. That's not how anything works.
Just another intentional dishonesty here from Forrest trying to save evolution. Kyle explained the experiment that after 100 years and 10,000s and thousands of generations of flies and a bunch of radiation mutation, the flies are no farther from being a fly than when they first started. They're constrained to being a fly, no matter what you do with them. But Forrest here tries to make it look like he's portraying evolution to pop out a dog after one generation. But Kyle is pointing out that after 40 million years, I looked up this fact. It was proven by some other science articles that after 40 million years worth of evolution, according to the Science Daily article, there it is, I wrote it down, that if evolution is true, after 100 years of this experiment, if nature was prone to the type of evolution evolutionists actually mean when they use the word evolution, then we would see a new kind of creature by now. But it's still a fly, and it will always be a fly. Number 5, peppered moths.
Number 5, English peppered moths. We're told that English peppered moths provide an example of evolution in action. You see, before the Industrial Revolution, there were 2 varieties of English peppered moths. One dark-colored, one light-colored, but the light-colored was much higher in ratio than the dark-colored. But after the Industrial Revolution, the dark-colored became the more prominent color and the light, the fewer in the mix. And we're told that's because birds could see the light-colored better, etc. And this was supposedly an example of natural selection. The problem with this example is, number one, many of the pictures were faked. But the second problem was that before the Industrial Revolution, the genetic information in the English peppered moth genome had genetic information for 2 varieties, light-colored and dark-colored, and after the genetic information was the same. English peppered moths simply do not prove evolution.
Okay, so even if I'm going to grant you the first part, that these moths just don't land on trees, sure, why not? There were a lot of pictures that were faked back then in like nature documentaries and for natural purposes, sure, maybe. The second part of that statement, you just ran full force into the premise and still missed it somehow. You said yourself that these 2 different types of moths existed before and after the Industrial Revolution, but in different frequencies, and that doesn't prove evolution. That's the definition of evolution.
We touched on everything here already, and we get to see the ambiguity of the word evolution again. Instead of fully agreeing with his statement because it's true, Forrest states that he gave the perfect example of evolution, of how there was a lot of white ones, but after environmental pressures to the creature, the black ones are now more prominent. So Kyle is saying that this example they used to prove evolution from one kind of organism to another is not true. There was no added information. While Forrest is disregarding completely what Kyle is saying and meaning, and focusing on the observable definition of evolution, which they have coined to mean any change across generations in a population. So Kyle is right, and technically, Forrest is right. So what's the problem? This is what I mean about shady and deceptive. They will not separate observable, repeatable evolution from non-observable and non-repeatable evolution. They're defined as the exact same thing. So even though the kind-to-kind evolution cannot be verified and tested and is never actually witnessed, they group its validity in with the verified evolution that all scientists and people agree with and actually observe. They will not let you separate it. Therefore, if you say you do not believe in evolution, then you do not believe in what we observe and test and repeat. And they know this. It's intentional. and it's very crafty. It's demonic, quite honestly, and it's purposeful. All because they can't stand the thought of God. It's a global conspiracy where their natural hearts all desire the removal of God. So they are all willing participants of this theory, and they further it along. And just to add, while we're kind of on the topic, these people hate the word kind because it's biblical and actually quite accurate. They mock it and refuse to associate with it. They demand a definition, and for some reason, a lot of people have difficulty with this. I'll give you one that you can take to the bank. A kind is one creature that can originally reproduce with another creature. Now, just because it may be difficult for us as men who lack knowledge, difficult for us to figure out what kind everything fits into each other, that doesn't change a thing. Maybe one day we'll get there, maybe not. They will still remain in their kind. But there's one more point he was going to address on horse evolution. That was his number 6. And it was being admitted that it did not evolve like most things. And Forrest agrees with this, but it's all the same kind of things, just more ambiguity. So this is basically the theory that is treated like fact. This theory that causes Christians to be mocked and demeaned for not believing in it. It is a theory that if you don't believe it as a scientist who doesn't even believe in God, you don't get grants. You get ousted from your community. But you know who won't oust you? Who remains faithful even when we're not? Who grants you peace and a sound mind? Something that unbelievers will never attain. Who, though you may be mocked for believing in him now, will crown you with everlasting glory. His name is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, the Savior of man. And so that's it for another episode. I hope it made sense to you guys and just showed you how destructive this theory is, how easy it is to see its weaknesses, its deception. I hope it's going to help even people seeking truth to be more discerning and to understand. I hope it's a benefit to people out there. And I do hope it shames the mocker, the scoffer, and the evolutionist that thinks you cannot believe in God and do good science. And so, people, remember to test everything for whether it is true, expose the darkness. And until next time, continue to tear down every stronghold and take captive every thought that raises itself against the knowledge of Christ. Peace for the church, for Christ.